All right. Are you ready? Backflip.
I'm a hamstring. I'm a hamstring.
I know. He's doing a backflip. You guys got to watch the YouTube video outside of Dubai. Oh, there it fell.
Here we go.
All right, let's flip it. So I want to hear a little bit. I'm really curious. You had mentioned that there was let's go back to you a little bit. Your life, you talked about some tough times for you and your mom being she's the financial planner or the financial.
She was the bank manager that sucked at being a home financial
Yeah.
manager.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your upbringing and kind of what got you, it's a long tall order, but what got you into where you are now?
Yeah. So I appreciate that question. I find that question for me, probably no more or less complicated than probably it is for you to share yours.
Yeah.
I grew up, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I think it's a really great way to describe it. I grew up in an Irish Catholic household, minus the drinking, with a touch of violence, no Catholicism, but all the guilt. And so and I was the youngest by 5 years. And my mom was married prior to meeting my dad. And so I had two half brothers that were older. My mom moved from Toronto to Vancouver, BC, and married a Jewish guy. She came from a very strict Catholic family. So that usually at the time was very frowned upon back in the 50s. And so they get divorced. He marries her best friend. And that was probably, I'm sure that manifested itself in many ways growing up. But, being the youngest of five, I also had traditional parents that really believed that their job was not to entertain you. And their job was not to play with you. And so I had two older brothers who swam full time. If you've ever been part of a swimming family where swimming is the center, swimming is a full-time extracurricular activity, 5 mornings a week, 5 nights a week, weekends, traveling for swim meets. So I was by myself a lot. There were no kids in the neighborhood. And so, and my mom and dad, my dad was also a Vietnam vet, and he definitely had some PTSD. I remember one time vividly going to the mall at Christmas on New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve, and he was just running through the mall. And I was like, why the F are you sprinting, right? My dad was 5'10", 280. So he was overweight, didn't work out, super unhealthy. And I remember him elbowing probably his 8-year-old right in the head. And my dad wasn't like, he was really good with other kids. Elbowing a kid right in the head and not even missing a beat, just like bam, and then just going. And I just looked at him. At the time, I didn't connect it. I didn't get it. In hindsight, he had PTSD, and tight quartered places freaked him out. And he couldn't deal with the crowd. It gave him anxiety. So I grew up in this house with that, and a mom who had some serious mommy issues and daddy issues, and she wanted to give that to me as well. And I know this sounds like this bleak environment, but I wasn't, the mantra in my house when it came to education was just give it a go, just try. Not get A's or do good grades or go study or, both my parents worked. We barely got by. We were lower middle class. We lived in a 3-bedroom house with 6 people. That was 900 square feet.
Wow.
1 bath. So, we didn't have a lot of money. The power was turned off early on in my life when we'd come home sometimes. So yeah, I just kind of grew up, and I didn't know it at the time. I wasn't aware. But in hindsight, I can see the impact it had on my parents' relationship. I can see the impact it had with them and their relationship with me. I can see how it manifested what I thought love was, what I thought intimacy was. I didn't see my parents touch until I was in college. Occasionally I'd hear them have sex that was disturbing and scarring, but I didn't really know what was going on. And at the age of, and I've never really talked about it, but I'm coming more to grips with it. In 3rd grade, 4th grade maybe, I'd go to a friend of mine's house, and we would look at Playboys. His dad had a Playboy stash. So I'm like, 10, 11 years old, I'm looking at porn.
Yeah.
And we would act out the scenes in the magazines, fully naked, and I was always the female. So even at a young age, whether I didn't recognize it then, I recognize it now, I was demasculated constantly, you know? And so you think about, you know, that's just the framework of my childhood before I get to 15.
Wow.
And it had a deep-seated, I mean deep-seated planting in my subconscious in terms of the behavior choices I made later on in life. So, you know, and this is in Portland, Oregon, which is where I was raised. And so, you know, we never took vacations. We took 2 vacations to Toronto to see my grandparents. We took 1 vacation to the beach, and Portland's like an hour and a half from the ocean. 1 vacation to the beach for 48 hours, and went to the mountains twice, which is an hour and a half away. And that was the extent really of any of our vacation. Maybe there's 1 or 2 in there that I don't remember, but there was no, like, we went to Hawaii for a week, or we went to Disneyland for a week, or there was none of that. Couldn't afford it. Wasn't going to happen. And so when I, by the grace of God or Allah or whoever you pray to, got into college, I got into the University of Dayton on a water polo scholarship. So I played water polo.
Wow.
But this, you know, the choice to go there, and I only actually realized I'm totally embarrassed to admit this. Last night I took one of those Facebook tests just for the sake of, like, I was exhausted. So it's like, hey, take this quiz. But it really resonated with me. And it was like, what is your success blocker? And really well done, by the way, the company that did it. And it was the fear of feeling worthy. And so I went to a university in the Midwest so that I could play water polo right away and have value. But if I was smart and had worth, I would have gone to a community college in California and gotten better at the craft, right? So that was my first time, though, getting away from my parents. So I went to the University of Dayton. And then, to speed up, because I don't want to, and please stop and ask any questions, interrupt me. I could care less.
Okay.
I mean, you know what I mean?
No, this is, what's coming to me is the vulnerability. You know, I am so touched by what you're sharing, and I'm having a hard time stopping you because I continue. I have questions.
So if you have questions, yeah, just fire away though.
Yeah.
And so at University of Dayton, I struggled. Like, I barely got by. I graduated with a 2.4. And in the midst of college, my dad passed away when I was 20. My mom and dad had moved from Portland to Chicago briefly, but they were in Atlanta, Georgia at the time for my dad's job. And I didn't know this at the time, but my dad passed up many promotions, so he didn't have to move me. My brothers were off in college, so he passed up many pay raises and sacrificed quite a lot, actually, up until I went off to college. And then he took a new job, same company, but in Chicago, and then down in Atlanta. And when they moved to Atlanta, he got sick. In 6 months, he died. You know, in the book, I share the story of exactly where I was at, the phone call, the whole entire thing, like everything, who I was with, the drive back up, because I was out visiting my ex-girlfriend, and she was at a college down in called Monmouth, Oregon, which is about 2 hours south of Portland. Right. And I was visiting her, and the drive up. I mean, I remember the whole thing. Like, it's very vivid. You know, those moments where, and you know, and I back up. I remember the exact call, the words that said your dad was dead. And then I don't remember anything after that. And then I remember the drive, making jokes on the way up, because that was my family's personality. But there was just huge, anyhow. So I go back to college that summer. And in the middle of the summer, my dad just passed away. It was May. And I was with my mom in Atlanta. I had to teach my mom to drive. She didn't know how to drive, so I had to teach her to drive at 20 years old.
Wow.
Talk about panic attack.
That would put me into massive panic attack. Yeah.
My mom was 50, hadn't driven since she's been like 22.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So anyhow, so that summer I got in a pretty big car accident. I drove the car off the road, jumped it over a ravine, smashed it on the other side. A tree branch went through the window, just missed my head by about 6 inches. It was a mess. And it was in my mom's neighborhood.
Wow.
But I mean, just imagine it at 4 a.m. getting a knock on the door from some stranger. Hey, your son is just got in a car accident and your husband had just died. Like she lost her shit. Like she went off the deep end. So anyhow, I was okay at the end of the time. So anyway, I go back to college, and the only thing that saved me is I had a girlfriend at that time who was a way better person than I was. Like just oodles better than I was. And I was the world's worst boyfriend, but she drugged me to the library and got me to pass the next 2 semesters. And then I started to come around my last year of school and get it together a bit. And short of it is that I graduated, but you know, I've had no, I had no passion. I had no focus. I had nothing. I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I was going or why I was alive. Like, what was my being, you know? And I think many people struggle with these things. Like, it's nothing new or different.
Right.
But I was also struggling with the fact that I had a void. I had no dad, you know. I'm not close to my 2 brothers. You know, right after my dad died, within 2 years, one of my brothers stole $10,000 in credit cards from me. So, you know, he was my best friend at the time. Wow. And so when I found this all out and there was a huge denial to it, and, you know, I snapped a little bit. And so, you know, so now the people who are closest to you, you lose your father, who you're starting to move. You know, every male and son, a father-son, has this really dynamic relationship where there's a bit of battling going on, right? Like, especially as you get the teenage years, you know, and I have 2 boys, one's 10, one's 5. And I know it's coming, but we were moving out of that transition of father-son to friends. Right. Like that's where we were heading. And so, you know, I missed that. I don't know what that's about.
How old were you again when this happened?
I was 20 when he died. He was 20 when he died, turning 21.
You're 44 today. Okay, so this is
correct.
Quite a while ago. Wow.
Yeah, a long time ago. But I mean, even now I'm getting choked up about it, thinking about it. So,
of course.
And when you think about, you know, and I know I'm taking the long road for my journey.
That's great.
I honestly, even at 44, I'm not sure what my purpose is. And I know that sounds pretty sad. Maybe not sad. I think it sounds me. It sounds me. I've never done things the way that's supposed to be done. And so I go off and I graduate and I go to Chicago and I was like, I'm going to get my master's, you know, because I don't know what I want to do. And I entered a program to become a film producer. So I was getting my master's in media management.
Oh, wow.
But at the same time, I'm a bouncer at a bar. I'm a personal trainer at a gym. I'm passing up a job at one of the top ad agencies because it wasn't going to earn me enough money to survive. And I made all sorts of choices that I would never take back, but definitely did not help my cause future in life. But I got lucky and got a job at 24. I took the phrase "fake it till you make it" to a new level. And I got a job opening the 41st office for a national advertising office.
Oh, wow.
And so I flew back to Portland because that's where my mom was at. So I moved back to Portland from Chicago. And I had to find the office space. I had to find the furniture. I had to hire staff. I had to go out and do new business sales. I had to pay the bills. I had to do like everything. I mean, I was not, my boss was in Texas. I was not equipped to do that job at all. You know, some people have the DNA to jump right in there and do it. I did not. I did not have the confidence.
Right.
I did not feel like I belonged to many of the conversations, and that was the idea of feeling worthy. So I do that for a year and a bit, and I took a new job down in San Jose trying to save another office. So I faked it until I made it again, and I moved to San Jose. And this office was a disaster. It had 15 people, down to 5. Long story short, within 5 months, I get fired for a multitude of reasons. And it's a great story. Do you remember back in like 2000, this is right in the dot-com boom. Do you remember like when you used to get emails and you knew you weren't supposed to click on the link, but you were really curious what was on the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I happened to be in my office. Yeah. I at my job and I clicked the link. The downside was that I infected the whole entire network of 22 offices and knocked it offline.
Oh my God.
The upside is that I got fired 1 week later, or made redundant, as they said. And you know, but at the end of the day, that was the best thing that ever happened. You know, we went to a branch manager retreat out to New York, where the headquarters were, and all the branch managers stayed in a 3-star hotel, and the owners stayed in a 5-star resort down the street. And you're just like, all right. So as soon as that happened, I was like, I don't want to work here. Like, that's just really crappy to treat your people that way.
Yeah.
So I got fired, and then I moved to New York. And I thought at this point, my passion was water polo. So I thought I was going to coach. So I went to a small liberal arts college and got my MBA and coached for free for 2 years.
Wow.
So I got my MBA. So that was like the bonus.
Right.
And then I failed again. And in the end of my second year, I got fired. I quit on the pool deck during the championship game. And then I got fired when we got back to university. So we were up in Rhode Island, we were in the finals or semifinals or something like that. And I just got really angry. My emotional intelligence was not the highest at that time. And I just quit. I quit on the deck. It's like, you might want to bleep this out, but I was like, I fucking hate you all. I quit.
Wow.
And I just quit right there. And the assistant coach, she was actually the associate head coach of like the whole thing. It's a longer story. But I got back and I got pulled into an office with like, you know, the AD, the assistant AD, the other assistant AD, and they're like, we have to let you go. And my personality is very much where I know when I'm wrong. Like, I don't have to be right. And I said, yep, I totally get it. I know why I'm fired, and I accept that responsibility of the choices I made. And they were like, okay. Like they thought that was going to be like a huge, like, nope, I deserve to be fired. I did the wrong thing.
Right.
And so I finished my MBA there, and I moved to Tokyo that summer. And so
let me pause. Hold on. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm following, but like, what got you from Rhode Island or East Coast to what made you go to Tokyo? How'd that happen?
So this is where I don't know what I want to do. And so in the summer before I got fired, I took a team of water polo players to Australia, and it was the first time I'd ever been abroad.
Okay.
And I just like, it was, for me, going abroad was the first time was the most impactful, eye-opening moment in my life of, I knew there was other things out there. I knew the world was much bigger than the United States, but I had never experienced it. I never had a fruit bat fly out of a tree and almost land on you and freak you out. I've never had gone out to the Great Barrier Reef and seen actual coral and fish in live real time. Like, I had never experienced all these things, like the Opera House. And I was just blown away by the possibilities. And so when I finished my MBA, all I knew is I wanted to go abroad again.
Right.
All I knew is that I wanted to go experience something else. And I knew that teaching English was an opportunity. And so I went to Japan and I taught English. And Tokyo was probably one of the most phenomenal places ever. But I mean, the irony of the whole thing is that I remember I turned 30 when I was in Tokyo, and I called my mom, and this is before cell phones or Skype and all that. So I called my mom in a phone booth, and this is like 2003. Skype was just coming around, and I'm crying on the phone. Like, I'm just crying. My mom's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm worthless. I have no job. I have no career. I have no direction. I'm in Tokyo in a phone booth. My mom, I'm like, I can't breathe. And my mom was like, all right, Jim. I'm like, yes. She's like, shut up. She goes, shut the fuck up. Stop your crying. Get off the phone and go live your life. You're fine. And that was like all she said. And that was the compassion my mom could muster at the moment, was like tough love. Right.
Right.
And so I was like, I guess she's right. I hung up the phone. And so I left there in a year, and I went back to Portland, and I lived with my mom at 31, which is awesome. And great for dating.
Every man, right? I was saying, like,
Yeah,
what the heck was dating like? How did you meet your amazing wife, Mary? I mean,
that story is a long story. I'll get to that in a second. And so I'm living with my mom, and I started doing contract work, new business development for a tech firm, but it was only a year contract. And I was like, all right, what am I going to do? So I applied for the Peace Corps, and I got in. And then I was going to go to Eastern Europe. I wanted to go to an island because I wanted to be in the sun. Right. And they said, no, you're going to go to Eastern Europe. And so I went to an event. And this, Julie, you've mentioned when I interviewed some moments in your life that were just transformational, they were an aha moment that puts you on a different path. And so this was the moment for me. I went to an event on Portland State's campus. It was for future Peace Corps applicants. And I was sitting there, and they were giving the talk, and here's what you're going to do, and this is what it's like. And everyone leaves, and I'm talking to the host, and her friends come who are from Africa, and they're PhD students. And we're just talking. And for the first time in my life, I felt like my intellect was enough to belong.
Worthiness.
Yeah. Here are these guys who gained their PhD in public policy and development and all this, and I'm holding a real conversation about politics around the world. And, at the time I was pretty snooty. I was reading The Economist every week, front to back, and like really trying to, up my political and global knowledge. And I thought, I think I'm going to get my PhD. And that was it. And that is when I applied to go to Perth, Australia, to go get my PhD there, because I wanted to go abroad again. And so I got in, and the school is considered an Ivy League for Australia. So I was pretty lucky.
Wow.
And, fast forward and I finished it. I met Mary, had our first kid in Australia, moved to Philadelphia to start teaching at St. Joe's University before I finished my PhD, had a second kid before I finished my PhD. So here I am, like brand new job teaching, doing research, finished my PhD, being a dad. Every weekend I was at a coffee shop working 16 hours over the weekend, 20 hours over the weekend, writing, super intense. And 7 years later, I fail again. And I don't get tenure. So anyone in academia knows tenure is kind of like the holy grail.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what you're aiming for.
You've made it. You've made it. You cannot be fired, which in itself is a flawed system, just to be clear. I don't agree with that.
Right.
But I remember I was going to the airport because I was taking students over to Milan and Barcelona for a trip. And I got a call from the provost saying, hey, bad news, you didn't get tenure. I was like, oh, snap. I was like, okay, I didn't expect that. All right. And so that pivoted me to come out here and take my family out to the Middle East for 4 years.
Wow.
For my kids to experience the other, to really represent what your family tried to do, the idea of oneness.
Yeah.
Show them that, at the time my son was going to a fairly elite prep school, even though he was a young kid. And you could get the sense with the parents that there was a lot of elitism, which was fine, but there was also stereotypes and judgment and prejudice and racism. Yeah. And I didn't want the idea of what a Muslim was or what an Asian was. I didn't want that thrusted upon them. Yeah. I wanted them to have their own experience in their own world, to come up with their own definition.
Right.
And so that's how I ended up here with a wife and 4 kids, all under 10.
Whoo! Wow.
Sorry, that was not short at all, by the way.
I'm like, I take notes and like, I'm just managing my brain, like which one do I go into first? Because there's a bunch of things well, I think what's incredible, just going back to what we talked about in the earlier conversation about intuition, I'm curious because it feels like, or it seems to me that you mentioned quite a few times about failure. You said, I failed again. I failed again. But something has, to me, I'm like, oh, not failure, learning, which I'm sure
you're right.
See now, which I'm sure you see now. Right. I'm curious because we talked about intuition earlier. Can you piece where you're just a thread it back in? Where did your intuition show up? So was Australia an intuitive idea because you met your wife over there, right? In Australia?
Yeah. So, boy, I don't have short stories. So I originally met my wife in 1996 at a water polo tournament. She went to Notre Dame. However, we went on a date, hated each other, and then didn't talk for 8 years. And in that time period, my name went from Jim to James. And I went from having hair to having no hair. And so when we reconnected, she was actually living in the States and I was in Australia. And it took about probably 2.5, 3 weeks of talking until one story started connecting the thread that we had been on a date and went out and had met. And so we didn't realize it for 3 weeks until the story started to unravel. And the only way that she told me, and we knew, is that she sent me a photo with my arm around her at a party at Notre Dame that she found.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I mean, I'm giving you the really abridged version, but it's a pretty amazing story about how I met my wife 8 years later. And it was Easter 8 years apart. So it was
wow.
Easter. So yeah. I think if I was to listen to my intuition, I would have been an entrepreneur to start. So I think for me, there were 2 battles going on always. Even to this day, there's 2 battles going on.
Yeah. What are the battles?
The first battle is I belong, right? Intellectually, emotionally, intimacy, all that stuff. And the other battle, and to do that, I manifested that by saying, hey, I can go get a PhD. Right. Like I have 2 masters and a PhD. Who the hell needs 2 masters and a PhD? Nobody does. Nobody needs that much education.
No.
Right? But I felt compelled to prove myself that I belonged in some sort of intellectual world.
Yeah.
And the other side is that I'm so driven to be an entrepreneur that I've done that at the behest of me actually being successful in academia. That makes sense. So I keep chasing these entrepreneur ideas that don't come up to anything, don't really earn me any money. But that means that I'm not doing research to maintain my spot in an institution.
Yeah.
So I constantly have this pull of go be an entrepreneur. Oh, I got to teach and make money to raise 4 kids to put food on the table. Go be an entrepreneur. Oh, I got to raise more money. Like, so it's an internal battle that weighs on me a lot. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question because I think I've ignored my intuition, which is why I asked that question earlier.
Yeah.
That the signs keep pushing me that way. To be entrepreneur. It's like everything the lens I look through is entrepreneurial. The people I meet are entrepreneurs. Like everything I do is in that way, except my wife, who's probably one of the most amazing human beings because she can deal with me on a regular basis, is risk adverse. And so there's that tension of safety and adventure seeking.
Right. Well, so my question is, and this is just, I'm really curious now, what, if you were to really hone in on your intuition and think about, the painting the picture of the future, the most ideal future, what would that look like for you?
Don't go all AI on me.
I know. I was trained that way as a coach anyhow. I was like, this stuff works. It changed my life.
Yeah.
AI is appreciative inquiry, by the way, for those listening.
Sorry, guys. Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute, AI is not artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We're going real weird here now.
When do you want to put those microchips under your eyes?
Right. AI is appreciative inquiry. Okay.
I really appreciate that question because I've been asking myself that same question.
Yeah.
where I'm at today, at this moment, is that I'm creating something that's magnificent. I'm creating something that I can take my last 25 years of experiences of opportunistic failures, if you will, and be part of something bigger than me. You know, one of the downsides of being an entrepreneur and a solopreneur is that you're often by yourself.
Yeah.
And you just create something for yourself. And I know it's for others, but you're in your own silo, in your own head. I'm tired of that for me. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy facilitating. Those things are awesome. But I want to put my fingerprint on something that says, listen, I've got this crazy experience of living all around the world. This adds value in an organization. I've got this crazy experience of 10 years of teaching and educating. That adds value in an organization. I've got this crazy experience of getting certified in appreciative inquiry. That adds value in an organization. And I've written a book on leadership, which we haven't even talked about, by the way, but we've written a book on leadership. Down.
We must go to your book. And I want to talk about it. It's awesome. Yeah. Go into that.
So this is where I'm at. It's like, I want to create something that puts these things together. And so, you know, when you talked about your 15 years early on and the struggles that you had, they were all for a reason, for something greater on down the line.
Yeah.
And I've been feeling this way. I remember I had this conversation with my brother and his wife. I have a stepbrother who's married to a lovely woman. They had 7 kids. She was one of 8. And I used to go see them in my mid-20s. And she used to always say, like, what are you running from? And my response was always like, maybe I'm running to something. Why does it have to be from something? You know, and I've always felt that, like you had a premonition when you were a child, right? And I say this as humbly as possible. I've if that's possible, I think the fact that the preference that I'm saying it humbly means probably it's not humble. Is that I always have felt that I'm destined to do something great.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I don't know what that is, but I feel like I'll know it when I get to it. And right now it's the creating something. So, the book, what do you want to know about it?
Well, I'm like, all right, I feel like we need 5 more hours because I got you. It's all good. I'm managing myself. Well, I think just to what you just said, you know, when we start to awaken, this is my belief, to life in a more, you know, we're more awake to who we are, conscious, start listening, right? Like what you said about destined to do something great, to me, not only is that, it's not even, you don't even need to say humble or not, because I mean, my belief is, why the heck else would you be here but to do something great? And that's the adventure. And so I'm sitting here like, well, I totally am on your train. I know you're gonna do something great. And I think those listening, it's like, if you feel called to that, there's something really there to listen to. We don't have to always know what it is. And so I guess what I'm curious is the Crucible, like what made you decide to write that book? How do you see that adding to doing something great in the world?
So I think it's similar to you when you wrote, you know, get your PhD in you, right?
I did not get a PhD, by the way, which makes me laugh my head off. I will someday probably, but I think you actually did. So I want to say hats off to you, man. No joke.
It was a glutton for punishment. I felt like it was inside me. And, you know, you had all these experiences and you're like, okay, I'm compelled to write these down in a way that I think can help somebody.
Right.
So the way I felt about the book is that everybody struggles to figure out how to be the best version of themselves. And we all fall short on it on different days. But what if I wrote a book that's more like a narrative or a story, using different leaders that I interviewed to add verification and validity to the concepts in the book? What if my story isn't any different than your story, Julie, but I just put it in different words that might resonate with you? Then that's something. you know.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't sold a lot of them, but I've sold some of them. So, I mean,
Yeah.
some people are reading it. And the idea of the Crucible, I think, is really important, because often many of us let our adversity define us, and we don't actually define our adversity. So it's happening to us, not for us.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm just writing that down. I agree. I love it.
And I think as soon as you get to the place in your journey with that adversity, and there are multiple adversity moments, some are deeper than others, but when you get to that point where you say, this is happening for me, you're no longer held captive by the to me. And that really, to me, is this overarching premise of the book, is like, we all have shit sandwiches sometimes, but it's how you decide to think about that and over a time period. You know, there are people that I interviewed, you know, the CEO of will.com, WHIL.com, was crushing it in career. He was the COO of McCann World Group by 40. Like that does not, if for your audience, that is like $1 billion advertising agency. Like,
yeah,
that
huge.
did not happen by 40. And he was miserable. He was unhealthy. He was cranky. He was a mean boss. His marriage wasn't great anymore. He didn't know his kid because he was traveling. And he realized that his adversity really came from his childhood, growing up in a drug addicted house, alcoholics, his twin sister dying, his other sister dying, both in the same year, all within like a 2-year period of like his dad dying. And he just took a pause and was like, what can I take from this that's good? Right. And his good was, I'm quitting my job as COO, and I'm going to go off and make something great that means something to me. And there are so many people out there that have way more amazing stories than I do. You know, we were at an event, Julie, back in October with that Nick. I can't remember his last name, but Nick.
Emmert?
No. Nick Santa, the gentleman who has no legs, one arm.
Oh, Nick. I can't say his last name, but yes.
Yeah, it's like 27 letters is his last name.
Yeah, exactly. He's amazing.
So he just puts everything in perspective. And you had a gentleman on your show recently in a wheelchair. I can't remember his name, Dr. something.
Sean Stevenson. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you start looking at the world around you, and I'm coming full circle here. The idea of the book is saying, listen, your adversity might be bad for you, but take a look what's going on around you and start thinking about other things other than yourself. And then your adversity really is just a moment, an opportunity for you to grow as an individual.
Yeah.
Amen
to that.
Yeah. I think often we get so, and I'm okay, you know, and here's the thing though, I'm really okay with you. I'm okay with the person who has bad adversity to take time to have some pity on themselves. And I know that maybe is counterintuitive, but like, you have to be in it to get out of it. You know, sometimes people say like, oh, just frame the adversity in a positive way. You can't always do that right away.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have to be willing. And I was on a podcast and the guy used this phrase, and I think it's awesome. You have to embrace the suck. Right. Once you embrace it, that's the flipping. That's the opportunity. That's the possibility of what can happen next. And so the book is really premised on this idea of saying, once you embrace your crucible, you're developing your self-awareness, you're developing your ability to be more compassionate, have more integrity, value relationships around you. But what I found in my research, and the literature suggests this, is that all of this only really happens if you have a growth mindset or a learning mindset. Yeah. Because we all know people who've had really bad adversity who just sit in it. Yeah. And sit. And their inability to grow as individuals make them really not to be fun to be around. And, you know, they end up being on their own little island often.
Okay, my question for you, and I know we're going to land the plane soon, but I mean, this has been so rich. So much here. Do you feel like your mindset has shifted, James, over the years? Like, would you say you were always in the growth mindset? Because I'm thinking, even what's so interesting is all the different crucibles that, you know, that we heard today that you've gone through. And it feels like there might've been a shift in your mindset at some point, but I don't know. I'm curious.
You know, my grandma, so not only did I have the pleasure to live with my mom at 30, I had the pleasure to live with my grandma at 19. Both
Wow.
equally fantastic for your dating life.
That might be even a little more tricky.
My grandma once said to me, she said, "I never worry about you because you're resilient."
Okay.
And so I think Julie, here's the thing. To be willing to live all around the world for no apparent reason other than for experiences, to desire experiences and differences. And, I've driven across America by myself. I've taken Amtrak across America by myself. I'm okay with me because that's the way I was raised, to be by myself. But to do those things, you in essence have to have a learning mindset, a growth mindset.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I made great choices, but it does mean that I was open to the possibility of learning something new and different.
Yeah.
So would I say it shifted? What I'll say it has occurred is that and I've earned this, I think, I'm wiser. And I don't mean that from an arrogant standpoint, but I'm wiser because of my experiences.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that does make me complicated to deal with because, wherever you fall in the political leaning in this world, I have sometimes a really it's difficult for me to embrace certain philosophies or thoughts. And I pretty quickly, I'm always open to the other person's perspective, but I pretty quickly have a hard time dealing with them because they're not open to the possibility of another perspective. That makes sense, right? Like there's always two sides of an equation. If you can't hear the other side, then you don't have all the information. So to answer your question in a longer answer as always, I think I've always been resilient, but I'm wiser now to everything. I think.
So the common denominator has been resilience, and what's come out of, it's like you have a wine over time, it gets richer, deeper, bolder. So for you just that wisdom has been harvested, is harvesting. Yeah. Because it's not done. I'm curious. I want to get back to something you said. I also want to go back to the Crucible, but you talked a lot about worthiness. And I know one of the battles that you struggle with is I belong, which I was thinking, what's so funny, not funny about that, but that is probably like, I was thinking, oh yeah, I think probably everyone listening probably has felt that or deals with that. But when you're in that struggle of do I belong, it can feel so isolating.
Oh yeah. So
it's like the irony is I think most of humanity deals with that, yet we're all struggling in our own brains thinking, do I belong? And it can feel so much like you're the only person.
Yeah.
But I'm curious you talked about worthiness quite a bit. You said you even took the test last night on Facebook.
Yeah. Shamefully.
But no shame here. It's all good. Yeah. I was like, oh great. I want to take the test. That's fun. Right? Growth mindset. All right.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. All right. What do we do with that? Yeah. So where are you today on the spectrum? If you were to rate it, like worthiness, maybe where you've been 0 to 10, how do you feel about your worthiness today? And maybe there's some wisdom, because I know you talked about, I experience you to be very wise. What wisdom do you have about worthiness? I think that is probably one of the biggest ones that we struggle with. I know that's been the theme in my life for sure.
Were you, I'm trying to remember.
I didn't take the
test. Were you at the last day of the event we were at in Cleveland? Were you there that day? Or did you?
Yes, I was. Yes. The last day. Yep.
Yeah. So when I cried in the middle of the circle.
Yes. Oh yes. Yeah. I loved it. That felt very normal to me.
Yeah. Well, that whole environment, that's pretty well accepted in that environment.
Right. I was like, that felt great. I don't know for you. Right. I do remember that. Yes.
That's a prime example of me not feeling like I belong. Right. Like, just to give the audience context, at the end of this event, there's a appreciative inquiry event done at the Flourishing Leadership Institute. We get in a circle and people who want to share can share. I went and shared that I really just felt alone. And for the first time, I kind of felt like I belonged to something. And for me, that's very powerful, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. But I come back to the other side of the earth and the isolation starts again. Right.
Mm.
Part of it's just location. It's the nature of the beast living on the other side of the world. Right.
Right.
And so when you ask me the question about worthiness, I struggle with it every day. I struggle with my own confidence, my own, and logically, I know it's ridiculous. Like it's totally ridiculous, right? I know it logically, but emotionally, it's this deep-seated subconscious thing of like, after I took the test last night about being worthy, I really started thinking about it, and it's because I was always trying to get my parents' attention. I was always trying to, and I was never worthy enough to have it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just doing their parenting role. That's fine.
Right.
Mary said that, her parents never played with her. I'm like, yeah, but you had 4 siblings. So you had someone to go play with to feel like you belong and worthy, where I never had that. And so, and I'm not trying to come up with like mommy and daddy issues, but I think that when you're trying to wrap your head around that now about what you were like at 5, in your brain, you go back to that place no matter what. And so I struggle with that every day. And it's something that now, I mean, since, not to beat a dead horse, but since I took that stupid test, it will now be in the front of my brain.
Yeah.
Is when I start to feel that way, what tactics or strategies am I going to do to counter that? To say, hey, I belong here. Like I've earned the space to have an opinion, to be in the conversation. And I would say this to anybody, like, you belong where you're at, right? Wherever you're at in that moment, you belong there. Don't allow yourself to be talked back into a corner and to feel as if you don't, because the minute you do that, you give up the power of the possibilities of what could happen if you stay in the moment and tell yourself you belong. And I think that's such an important thing for people to realize.
Wow, I just got chills on my arms, which is my indication. That was very powerful. And I think if you stretched it further, just to add to that, you belong where you're at. And even for me, I know that idea that we're all exactly where we're supposed to be. You could even, you could use words like divine timing, or it's all, like you said, it's all happening for you. So maybe even the worthiness struggle, I think about you and what you're creating and the battle with entrepreneurship, and you have this amazing book and all that you've done so far. And something said to me that there's something about this that probably will be part of what you get to continue teaching, because I found as we struggle through it, it's happening for you. And I love that you belong where you're at. And it just gave me this thought for you, like, wow, you're like, all of this is happening for you, or for anyone listening, like it's happening for you, not to you. And then, using that in your wisdom to help people be more resilient and know their worthiness through their crucible moments. Yeah. That's powerful. I'm going to write that out for myself after. You belong where you are at. Well, and I think, the piece to that too is just remembering that it's never a straight line, growth and,
Yeah.
You know that because you've literally traversed this world. You've traversed the world. Well, I will make sure we have all the info on your book, on you.
Can I do one short plug real quick?
Oh, plug whatever, of course.
Yeah. So the book's been out since April. Please pick it up, Amazon, Kindle, all that. But what I'm really excited about actually is the audiobook coming out. I want to say Feb, March. I'm not exactly sure. But I actually hired 3 actors. And so one actor is doing the narration, one male actor is doing the male parts in the book of the different interview, and a female actress is doing the female parts in the book.
Oh my gosh.
So the book is really dynamic in audio version. I've listened to one of the parts that one of the actors talks about a guy interviewed named Mitch Martin. Mitch Martin is basically in charge of wellness for Cedars-Sinai in LA. An amazing guy, but he tells a story about how he came out gay to his mom. His mom showed compassion, and this actor acts it out. And I was like almost in tears listening to it. And I interviewed the guy, and Mitch was not as emotional as this actor, but I'm like, man, he added some real value to the book. Wow. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. So for anyone who listens to audiobooks, please be on the lookout for that. I'm really excited about that.
That is so cool. That's so cool that you did that. Oh, I love it. I'm definitely going to get it on audio because
I think it's more impactful.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always, my go-to these days are audiobooks. Clearly I'm recording this in audio. Like people tend to, I think it's a great way to get your book without having to, I do love sitting down too, but we drive or moving. It's awesome. That's Correct. So cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think, gosh, you added huge value. It was really, really freaking fun, James, getting to do the
I had so much fun.
So much fun. We're sitting here, you guys, with like big grins, big shitty grins. Like, I hope you are too. I hope everyone listening, thanks for hanging in there with us, because this might have been one of my longer interviews, but it was a 2-for-1. You got 2.
Yeah, you can always split it up into 2 interviews too. So two releases.
Yeah, 2 releases, exactly. We'll just see. You're awesome. I give you just a lot of credit in being so open and candid and vulnerable and modeling that. I think that's one of the quickest ways to healing and to oneness is doing that. So you are an awesome example, and your book is fantastic. And I just think your authenticity in who you are you're a powerhouse.
Thank you so much, Julie, for your time, energy, and willingness to have me on the Youest You.